My dear friends, in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola, look, you know, whenever a Jesuit is preaching, sooner or later St. Ignatius is going to come into it. In the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, Ignatius places the story we've just heard, which I'm sure you recognize as the story of the Annunciation. Ignatius places the story of the Annunciation in the context of a broader sweep. Ignatius asks us to imagine the triune God enthroned in heaven, gazing at the entire world and seeing in the world all of the suffering, seeing women and men being born, and seeing people who are suffering, who are sick, who are dying, seeing all the struggles that human nature goes through. If we were to make Ignatius's reflection contemporary, which of course is what he would want us to do, before we delve more deeply into this story, we need to imagine the triune God, full of mercy and compassion, gazing at our world. And what would God see as God gazed at our world? God would see so many people suffering from the COVID virus. God would see so many families still grieving the loss of loved ones. God would see families and communities torn apart by racial enmity. God would see people's economic lives having been turned upside down, and people straining, wondering, how will they get through one more month's rent or food or tuition? God would see a world where we have done such damage to our ecology, where we've done so much damage to the earth, our home. God would see in our own country a spirit of such distrust and enmity and division. God would see so much strain, so much pain. And God would see a church divided, a church still reeling from a long history of abuse of authority and sexual abuse. And God would see a nation increasingly detached from its religious traditions and its ethical moorings. And when God gazes at a world such as ours, God decides that something must be done. And so, to a particular person at a particular time, God sent a message and a messenger and announced that it was time for God to intervene. And so we hear the story of the Annunciation to Mary, of the birth of Jesus. And we hear Mary's interaction with the angel. I'd like to suggest to you that as wondrous as this story is, there's another story which I suggest to you is every bit as wondrous. There's a story that is suggested and that we receive today's gospel as a paradigm for. I want to say that to every one of you who is celebrating this feast, this gospel doesn't only tell us a story about an event in the distant past. This gospel tells you and me my story and your story. Because when God looks at a world broken and divided and wounded, God still desires to heal that world. And so God sends maybe not an angel that we can name Gabriel, but God sends a message. God speaks into the hearts of women and men exactly like you and me, who come from specific towns, not Nazareth and Galilee, but maybe Greenwich or Stratford or Fairfield. And to each one of us, by name, God sends a message in our heart, speaking through our imaginations or our consciences or our analysis of world events or through our prayer or through the discussions that we have at our family table or in our classrooms, or simply in the struggle of each one of us to make sense of our lives. God is speaking And God is saying to each one of us, and especially maybe to our students of Fairfield Prep, God is saying, the first thing that you must understand is you are gifted. You are highly favored. Mary's not the only person in the world who is highly favored. Every one of us, but especially our students, it's vital that you hear the message of the angel spoken to you today. You are highly favored. Literally, the Greek says, you are gifted. And this is true of every one of you. You are gifted. And then the angel, speaking in our own hearts today, says to us, you are gifted and God is with you. You are gifted, which is to say, you are empowered, you are prepared, and now you have the divine presence of God at your side because you have a mission. Because every one of you is endowed. Every one of you is blessed and enriched and has the very presence of God with you to accomplish for the world a mission by which God will heal a broken world, bring truth to people who are in darkness, and mend our relationships. The long-term project of God of healing a world that is divided and broken and lost is still underway. And so, women and men who are listening, and especially our men of Fairfield Prep, you are favored, you are gifted, and God is with you. In today's gospel, the angel then goes on to explain to Mary precisely what her job is going to be. And it sounds utterly preposterous to Mary. And so she turns into her heart and she says, what could all this mean? How could someone like me be asked to be, or imagine that she could ever become the mother of the Redeemer? Every one of us might fall into the trap of thinking that I'm not that gifted to begin with. And I'm not all that conscious that God is with me. And who am I to imagine that I can ever do great things? I'm not even sure I'm going to pass my courses. I'm not even sure that anybody likes me. I'm not even sure that I matter at all. But today's gospel says you are highly gifted, you are favored, God is with you, and you are set aside for a mission. And when we feel as though there's nothing that I can accomplish in this world, that I have nothing to offer to my family, to my class, to my friends, to myself, we need to hear the angel's message addressed now not to Mary, but to you and to me, saying, the Holy Spirit is coming upon you, and the Most High is wrapping you around with His presence like a shadow. In other words, you are now in collaboration with the very presence and power of God, who can do with you more than you can ever dream or imagine. Who could ever imagine that God would look at you and me and say, I need you. I want you to be my collaborator to bring about a more just world, a world where we figure out how to use our resources well. I want you to be in whatever profession, with whatever skills, with whatever passions you have. I intend you to be so empowered by the Holy Spirit that together we will work the redemption of the world. Together, you and me, you empowered by my very presence, together we will bring beauty and fraternity and solidarity and good sense and dialogue and hope into a world so desperately in need. The angel says to Mary, and the angel says to you and me today, in the face of your own doubts, in the face of your own sense of inadequacy, and in the face of a world in such desperate need, do not be afraid. God's Spirit in us and through us can do what the world needs and what we can never imagine. The end of the story, of course, in today's gospel has Mary say, I am the maidservant of the Lord. Let your will be done in me and by me. The gospel leaves us then with a question. Will we believe that we have received a message and a mission from God? Will we believe that the Holy Spirit is powerful and pervasive and dynamic and transformative enough that the Holy Spirit, God's very own energizing, capacity-building Spirit, is at work? Can I believe that God intends for me to make a difference, that I matter, and that God intends for me to matter for the world? Can I believe that? And then finally, believing it, can I go the extra step that Mary models for us and say, yes, I don't know at this stage where the mission you ask me to perform will take me. I do not know what it will demand of me. I do not know what it will look like. I do not know whether people will approve of me or disdain me. I do not know the cost. But I know the mission, and I know the loving face of the one who invites me to give myself over to the mission for the sake of the world. I pray that you and I, in the concrete circumstances of our age and our time, summon up the strength, fall back on the power of the Spirit, and say, yes, yes, let your will be done in me for the sake of my sisters and brothers, and for the coming of your kingdom, a kingdom of righteousness and truth, of peace and of reconciliation. I am your servant. Let your will be done.